friends, it is Pixie time. I am so glad you've been joining me for these little chapters that I've been sharing. It just makes me happy to know that you're out there listening to Pixie's story. When we left off last time, Pixie was learning to look outside of her own situation a little more and to realize that other people were going through some stuff too. And I think that is something we all need to be reminded of, isn't it true? Especially lately when times are just a little different than they've been, with no school and some people, having to stay at home. And it's easy just to think about me, and how it's affecting me, and not to think about, oh, I bet this is affecting you too, and my neighbor and everybody else. So I think that that's something I hope that we kind of take away from Pixie and some of the lessons. So let's figure out where we left off. Here is a summary sent to me by Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. This is from chapters 8 and 9, which we did last time. Pixie had to be a clown for Halloween. Ricky and Pixie worked the kids' table together, and Pixie met Ricky's sister, who told her that their dad had left and their brother is at the war and their mom is not doing very well. Pixie realized that Ricky had things to deal with too. Then, in the next chapter in November, Pixie helped Granddaddy with the wood, and they talked about how nature and how the winter was going to be, and how nature was giving them all signs, and about giving thanks even when they are sad. So thank you, Patrick. That was my own writing of your words down that I couldn't read. So you did a good job because it came via email. But thank you, Patrick. That was a very nice summary, and it did teach us a little bit more about what we were just talking about, seeing things in through other people's eyes. We are now going to read chapter 10. So enjoy. Daddy left early on Thanksgiving morning to drive to the hospital to try to see Sissy. I wrote her a letter that I hoped would cheer her up, filling her in on school, Halloween, and the goings-on at the farmhouse. I wanted more than ever to visit her, but Daddy told me that until we knew we were all allowed to go and sit with her for a spell, there was no point in going all the way to Indianapolis to wave at a window. So while he drove my letter to Charlotte, I kept busy helping Granddaddy and Grandma. I tried to be thankful, but the entire house smelled of pie, bread, and memories. And those memories of our family visits to the farm for the holiday, with Mama alive and Charlotte well, and us all baking pies, stuffing the turkey, and laughing the whole time, they grabbed me with a powerful hold. I expected Grandma to point out I was being ungrateful with my gloomy mood, but she didn't say a word. She didn't even scold me for dropping the silverware smack dab on the floor when I was setting the table. Instead, she shook her head kind of sad-like as she said, "How about you and Granddaddy go and take that pumpkin pie to our neighbor? Ethel over there is having a hard time with her husband gone and her older boy off in the war. And while we have less than usual this Thanksgiving due to war rations, I'd be surprised if they got much food at all today." Grandma looked at the stove and the roasting pan and shook her head again. "That bird is taking its time and won't be done for at least another hour, so you and Granddaddy can run over there now. Isn't her other boy in your class at school? What's his name?" "His name is Ricky," I answered like I just decided that was his official name. I noticed Granddaddy giving me a wink. Granddaddy made sure I put on my coat and mittens, but when I pointed out he only had on a heavy flannel shirt he wore in the winter while he worked in the barn, he shook his head. "My skin's old and tough. It can't get hurt by a little chill in the air." Walking across the fields dry with cracked lines etched across them, I couldn't help but think how like Granddaddy's face the fields were. Mama used to say her daddy was born in the fields and he'd die in the fields, and now he was starting to look like the fields. But even with the lines plowed into his face by weather and work, he was a right handsome man. As we walked, he held the pumpkin pie in one hand and my hand in his other. The sound of the steady crunch of our footsteps was interrupted by a screech in the sky that sounded like a scream. I looked up and spotted a hawk circling overhead. "Look there," Granddaddy nodded. "The hawk's trying to get one of those fat rabbits for his own meal." I gasped and shook my finger towards the sky. Shame on you, hawk. Go away. Leave that rabbit alone. But what about the hawk? Granddaddy pointed out. Can't blame him, Pixie. He's hungry too. I didn't want the hawk to stay hungry, but I really didn't like thinking about him making a meal of that rabbit. Why does it have to be that way? I asked. Well, Pixie, that's just the way it is around here. The circle of life. Granddaddy watched the hawk fly away, giving the rabbit something to be thankful for. Life sure is funny sometimes, ain't it? He said. Every day is a lesson in beginnings and endings. What do you mean? Now Granddaddy held my hand tight as he explained. 2 years ago, your Mama and Charlotte both sat with us at our Thanksgiving table. I know you've been thinking about that too. And back then we had no reason to think that'd be the last time we'd all be around that table. He spoke matter-of-factly, not complaining. You never know when this time is actually the last time. We walked on over the fields until we came to a clearing where we could see a small white house a few yards away. By then I'd come to the conclusion about Granddaddy's observation. When you think of it that way, life's not funny. It's downright mean. Granddaddy gave a half laugh. Ah, Pixie, life's not mean. It's just sometimes too short. It's up to us not to forget that. I won't forget it, Granddaddy, but it sure is hard. He stopped and turned to me. I'm with you on that, Pixie. Sometimes it feels like all we can do is take a deep breath, pick ourselves up, and push on. Right then, a big dog came charging at us as we walked into the orchard that led to the little house. I'm not afraid of dogs, but from far away, this one looked more like a wolf. A hungry wolf. Granddaddy stopped in his tracks, too. But as the mutt got closer, we could tell he wasn't much to be afraid of. He looked like he hadn't eaten in a while. When he got wind of the pie Granddaddy was holding, he tried to jump up, but toppled over. I reached out to pet him. Now that's funny, I told Granddaddy. He smiled, keeping the pie out of the mutt's reach. See, Pixie? Not deciding who someone is before they have a chance to show us who they really are must work for dogs, too. I laughed as I petted the funny dog, who started drooling on my mittens. His name's Mud. That was a voice I knew without looking up. Ricky stood so close to us that I was surprised I hadn't heard his footsteps. What kind of name is Mud? I asked. Well, Ma says I named him when I was 4, Ricky told us. Said me and him got in the mud a lot. From what my big brother tells me, I reckon I'm lucky they didn't change my name to that too. Granddaddy laughed. Reckon Ricky suits you better, son. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. What you got there? Granddaddy held the pie higher, making Mud jump and fall again. Had this extra pumpkin pie just sitting over at the house. The missus wanted us to bring it over and see if you folks might kindly take it off her hands. Ricky's eyes got bigger as he looked at the pie. He looked over his shoulder at his house before turning to speak again. "Aw, that's mighty neighborly of you, but Ma says we can't take charity." He didn't stop looking at the pie as he spoke. "Well, I can certainly understand that, young man, but this here pie is going to go to waste if you don't take it, or it might go to Mud here. Could you maybe take it to your Ma and tell her she'd be doing us a favor by taking it off our hands?" "Guess I could do that, Mr. Johnston." Ricky reached for the pie like he was reaching for the first place trophy. He turned around and started walking away before he remembered his manners. "Thank you, Mr. Johnston. And Prudence. Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving." With that, we turned to go, and somehow the way home wasn't near as cold as the way there had been. See, once again, we're getting a peek at somebody else's life and realizing what they have been through. I think we had a little bit of maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there when we talked about nature and the circle of life things, because this is life on a farm. We might want to remember that. I'll come back to that too. Chapter 11. By the time we got back home, the turkey, which turned out to just be a chicken this year, was ready. Granddaddy finished saying grace right as Daddy pulled in the lane. I jumped up to greet him after Grandma made a show of putting down her fork and said, "How nice your Daddy got back early. We can wait for him and then have our meal together." The minute Daddy sat down at the table, Granddaddy asked the question we were all thinking. "Did you get a chance to see Charlotte?" "Sure did," Daddy told us, from the window again. "But she looked good." He moved his head up and down. I doubt if Grandma and Daddy knew I saw the look they gave each other after he said that, but I saw it, and I didn't like it. Daddy's mouth didn't have to say what his eyes already did. Charlotte didn't look good at all. That took my appetite away. Grandma noticed I wasn't eating much and took it as a reflection of the meal not being as wonderful as past Thanksgivings. Prudence, I know we're doing without some things this year, but I think it's worth eating, don't you? No, ma'am. I mean, yes, ma'am. It's delicious. I'm just thinking of Charlotte. And then Grandma said the strangest thing. I know. I miss her too, especially on days like today. I miss Charlotte being here, and I miss Catherine so much. At the mention of my mama's name, Grandma looked down, and I wasn't sure what I would do if she started to cry. My eyes stung already. Granddaddy's face was sad too as he watched Grandma. Thelma, remember Catherine's first time of cooking a pie for Thanksgiving? If I recall, she forgot something she needed to put in it. Sugar and flour. Grandma looked up, smiling, her eyes glistening as she cleared her throat. She mixed up the amount of sugar with the amount of flour for an apple pie she wanted to make. Granddaddy laughed, and the apples were so tart that year, but she was so proud of that pie. You ate it anyway? I asked. Of course I did. My daughter made me an apple pie for Thanksgiving, and we all ate it, even if it wasn't the easiest thing to get down. We laughed about it with her a few years later, and the four of us laughed about it again. It wasn't a big belly laugh kind of laugh, since it wasn't that kind of day, but it felt good, just the same. Halfway through our own perfectly baked pumpkin pie, Daddy pulled what I'd been waiting for out of his pocket, a letter. I was hoping with all my hope I'd get another letter. I'd read Charlotte's last letter so much I knew it by heart, and my heart needed another one to read and memorize. Did you give her my letter, Daddy? He nodded. Gave it right to the nurse. Your letter, Grandma's letter, the letter from Miss Beanie. Nurse promised she'd take 'em right to her. I asked to be excused from the table as soon as my hand touched the new letter. Grandma started to say something about the dishes, but stopped herself. Go on, she said, but I want you back down here in 20 minutes to help. Thank you, Grandma. I jumped off the chair so fast it tottered backward. The letter's not going to disappear. No need to run. Grandma tried to make her voice stern-like, but I saw her smile a little, and I walked as fast as I could, walk without running to my room. Our room. Again I climbed up to her top bunk and sat on the wood board where her mattress used to be. I studied the envelope like it might start talking to me, telling me what my sissy was doing when she held it in her hands. Closing my eyes, I tried to picture her, but the only picture that came to mind was Charlotte looking sad in her wheelchair the last time I saw her. I didn't want a sad Charlotte's face in my mind while reading her words, so I shook my head like something was stuck in it and I wanted to loosen it. I clenched shut my eyes and tried harder. Then I pictured Charlotte in the hen house, reaching under Teacher to get her egg like it was nothing at all. That was the strong face of Charlotte I wanted in my head. I inhaled slow, hoping each breath might help me cement in my heart the words I was getting ready to read. I exhaled. Dear Pixie, Happy Thanksgiving. I'm sitting in the hospital room, but pretending I'm home with you in our room, getting ready to walk downstairs and help Grandma make the pumpkin pies. If I shut my eyes and try really hard, I can almost smell the cinnamon and see Grandma's good china dishes on the table. But then I open my eyes and the only smell is the alcohol they use to clean everything that touches us. And the only thing I see is an empty bed where a girl close to my age used to be. She's gone now. They won't tell me what happened to her, but I know she's not home celebrating Thanksgiving with her family either. I just know it. I miss school. Nurse Margie brought me some books to read. Remember that one book I was supposed to get from the library before we moved, Little Women? That's one of the books she let me borrow. I'm only a few chapters in, but it's good. The sisters named Jo reminds me of you, especially after I read your letter about almost getting into a fight at school with Ricky. Plus, Jo hates to wear dresses. I'd probably be Beth since she's always tries to be nice, but she's a little boring. I've been writing in a journal too, mostly poems. I'll put one of my poems at the bottom of this letter. I know you won't believe it, but I miss going to school and having homework. I even miss chores and that rotten old hen. I bet even you would miss her if you were here. Nurse Margie tells me I'm getting stronger. She even lets me go see the little babies that have polio. I hold them and sing songs. I remember Mama singing to us. It's nice to have little ones to take care of, but it would be nicer if they didn't have polio too. One little girl, Nancy, is 2 years old. Sometimes she won't stop crying for anyone but me. Yesterday I gave her a ride on my wheelchair. I spun us around as fast as I could go, and she clung so tight to my neck I could hardly breathe. But we had fun. Guess I'd better close this letter now. Be sure to write to me what's happening at school and home. I miss you so much, but I know I'll be home soon, the good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. Love, Charlotte. My poem. Starch white sheets remind me of answers I'll never know. Sadness now sits on your bed, constantly asking, where'd you go? After sitting there on Charlotte's bare bunk, I read her poem again, wondering how my sissy peeked into my heart and wrote down words I didn't realize were stuck there. I was still reading it when Granddaddy came to the door. Look what I got here, he said as he held out a bone from the chicken. Remember, whoever gets the bigger half of the wishbone gets their wish. Want to give it a try? We both pulled on that old bone until it popped. Hard to say if Granddaddy's half was bigger or if mine was the one that won. But it didn't matter. We both knew we'd wished for the same thing. And I think we all know what that thing was that they wished for. So the end of chapter 11 tells us a little bit more about the whole family, tells us a little bit more about Charlotte's personality a little bit. But I also wanted to talk to you about a couple of writing things. Remember, I keep saying that I'm going to ask you to try your hand at a couple of writing things. And I would love for you to try these. These are some fun things that I like to put in all of my writings. I love this. The first one is, it's called The Power of Three. Whenever you give some details about something, to give three things. Like in this case, it said, I tried to be thankful, but the entire house smelled of pie, bread, and memories. Notice that's three things. We didn't say the entire house smelled of pie and bread. Something special about saying pie, bread, and memories. Notice that two of those are what's called concrete things, that we can actually smell pie, we can smell bread, we all know what that smells like. Memory is called an abstract word because we can't touch a memory. We can't really smell a memory, but that's why it's kind of cool to put that in there. So that's a fun exercise. If you want to try your hand at writing, think of something. It's easier to use the senses, like the whole room smelled like, the thing tasted like, it sounded like. So it's easier to use those senses, I think, are probably the easiest ones because they have an active type of verb use. Here's the English teacher in me coming out. But try that if you get a chance. I just think it's really, really fun, and it really can make your writing sparkle. I put that, you'll find that if you read my other books, you're going to spot some of those in it because I love that. It just makes for a more impactful sentence than just saying, the smell in the house reminded me of other times. To say the house smelled like bread, pie, and memories. I really like that. So see if you can do something with that. The other thing is Charlotte's poem. I love poems so much. I was weaned on Dr. Seuss. I love Dr. Seuss, and I thought everything had to rhyme at one point. So you'll also notice if you read my other books, I always sneak in poems to all of them because I love them so much. So Charlotte writes some poems, and I noticed there's something, well, I noticed because I wrote it, but I want you to notice that there's something called personification in this poem. Starch white sheets remind me, because personification is when you give human characteristics to inhuman things. Sheets don't usually remind you, hey, by the way, they're not telling you something, of answers I'll never know. And here's another form. Sadness now sits on your bed. Notice how it's as if I'm giving a name, Sally. Sally sits on your bed, but instead of putting a person's name there, I put an emotion, like sadness sits on your bed, constantly asking, where'd you go? So that's I love this assignment. When I used to teach creative writing, it was one of my funnest my most fun ones to give, where I would ask people to take an emotion and write as if that was the main character. And whenever you would say a person's name, instead say the emotion. So try that in your writing. And again, anything you write, if you want to share it with someone at home, that's great. If you want to save it and share it with your teacher, awesome. If you want to send it to me at my email. I would love to see what some of these things have inspired you. If you've gone off on a completely different idea and you want to show me, go right ahead. I'm very excited to read anything that you might want to share with me. So until next time, I just wish you well. I hope for all good things for you. I shall see you next time as we continue on with Pixie Pushes On. Until then, keep reading, be safe, and be kind. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.